We are recording.
Call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. And ask that we begin the meeting by pledging allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I notice you're coming down this hill and you're
I
hiding.
am, I'm getting there.
Last week it was a walker.
Oh, yeah.
And
And it was,
graduated to a cane, that's
by the end of the night, it probably should still be the walker, but I'm determined.
Track shoes will be next.
All right, first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. We've got two sets of minutes that were taken on the same night. First is our meeting that we held prior to the quad board meeting. So why don't we take that one first?
I make a motion to accept the minutes of January 17th, 2023.
Second. Made, seconded by Chuck. Any questions or discussions?
I was out that day.
If you have
Yes.
reason to believe that they are accurate or watch the meeting on TV, you can vote.
Oh, okay, well, I did, okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know, okay. I'll know that next time.
All right, no questions and motion to accept?
I wasn't here for that one, was I?
No, you weren't.
Oh,
All right. So abstain, you can abstain. Chuck?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Doug, you were.
I was
missed that
absent as well.
too.
Yeah.
All right. So the second one,
So that's 3 out of 7 board members.
So we
3
had-
out of
we
6
had-
now.
we had a quorum.
We have a quorum. Four is a
We had
quorum.
a
Fine.
quorum. We had four board members. Um,
Yeah. So I move-
And the second set of minutes of the quad board meeting.
I move to approve the quad board meeting of January 17th, 2023.
Second. All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion, hearing none? James, you're missing that meeting, being the same meeting.
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, chair votes aye.
Abstain.
Abstain, okay. All right, the year-to-date reports. I had stopped in to see Joanne was in today, so it's a big case. What caught my eye that confused me was that on the finance committee expenses, which would be on page 4. You see that the finance committee reserve fund was appropriated at $40,000. It has another $27,500. So a revised budget of $67,500. So what I understood is that we used $27,500. So I was thinking that perhaps Deanna had added the money instead of subtracting the money. But Joanne did a little research, and that's where they put the $50,000 for fuel reserve. Instead of setting up a separate line
Separate
item,
account, they put it in our reserve.
they added it to the $40,000. So that would have increased it to 90. We've used the 27.5, and the 67.5 is what's left. In my discussion with town manager, you know, I made it clear that the intent of the $50,000 is for fuel, to supplement any of the line items that go over because of fuel. So it needs to be really clear that what's available The rest of the budget is 17.5.
Yeah,
That's what's in, not 67.
not
It's still $50,000 that would be available to cover the impact of increased energy costs. And another one she straightened out for me was the library. Page 29. If you look at fuel oil, they haven't had to spend any fuel oil yet, but they had a water charge of $2,784. In fact, the water was $200, and the $2,784 was for fuel. She posted it in the wrong spot, so she's going to,
correct it.
yeah, correct that. You see, the budget's been overspent by $1,392. Woo! It kind of jumps out at you. And there's, I know that, under the town manager executive assistant salary, you see that's already in the hole. And that's because he's kept Linda on, and he's going to stay on, I guess, for the next few months.
Yeah.
So he's got to come up with the money for that. I think that the money that he,
Saved with the accountant?
no, I think the money that's on the warrant for the upgrade of the broadcasting equipment
Oh, okay.
might include some
Might
money
include some money for her.
for some salary.
Yeah.
And I met the new town accountant today.
Yeah.
She was in, working with Joanne. There were a couple of other things in here that I thought were interesting. Some of them in a positive way. The veteran services, for instance, the expenses right now for the veteran services, which are on page 28, it's only expended about 16% of the allocation. Not sure if it's what's behind it, but many years it worked in the other direction, so feel good about that. And the charter school tuition rate is coming in like 38%, so I'm thinking there are probably fewer kids at charter schools this year than had been anticipated. Anybody else have any questions about? There's a couple things on here that tie in with the next item on the agenda, which was a separation buyback request. If you remember, it was 2 years ago, I think, we asked the town to set up a reserve fund for buyback obligations that people have contractually. Typically, people could, with approval, could build up some vacation time and sick time. And those are contractually driven. And when I had done some research on it and to try to get a sense as to what the liability to the town was, seemed to me that the police department contract, it still is quite generous in terms of buyback opportunities. Whereas most of the other contracts have been changed over the years. And there might be one or two employees that have been around that, who are still entitled to the more generous buyback language. So in the police department, we had the chief retire. And I think there are 2 patrolmen who retired too. So Justin had asked me about it in terms of, you know, is this something that we'd use the buyback reserve fund? And I would think it would be. But, and it's nothing that we have control over. He doesn't come to us, it's not a reserve fund that's under the control of the finance committee. So really, this is just to generate some thoughts about making recommendations. But it had been my thought when I had the research is that the average, most employees might have a buyback kitty, if you will, of maybe around 7,000, less than $10,000.
Yeah.
And then there are a few people in the police who typically would have a lot more, particularly vacation time or sick time, that they could buy back.
Wasn't the fire chief one of those as well?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, fire chief still has it, and there's a couple of DPW workers that still have it. So the question I have is, should we be giving some guidance to Justin about having some sort of cutoff? In other words, if it's, with the first $10,000, should that come out of the operating budget? For instance, on the police, if you look at the,
I also think that to
There's-
reduce everything in that buyback.
yeah, they have
50%.
budgeted, you know, $14,000, so they're anticipating a retirement,
Right,
and they budgeted for it, and that's what you should do.
yeah,
I mean, if you know somebody is retiring in your department, and they're gonna reduce some money, you should build that into your budget. On the other hand, if somebody's buyback is more than $10,000, that's a lot of money to put in the budget for buyback.
how much do we have in that reserve fund?
Well, I think we put in 50 twice, so I think
Yeah,
we have
$100,000.
So I think that, yeah, because as long as they don't go below 50, I think we should keep at least 50 in it.
Right, but if we get a situation, let's say,
And then once these older people are gone, then you could take that
then
limitation.
you can cut it down.
Yeah,
I mean, it's, when I had first put the idea together, my thought was, whatever the liability is, there'll be a shifting number.
yeah,
And the liability actually should shrink over
and
time.
then we can
When
shrink.
the high liability people
Yeah.
retire, their replacement aren't gonna have such rich buyback aspects to their contract. So that at some point, the liability drops to the point where it equals the amount of money in the reserve account, and we don't need to put any more money in the reserve account, or put short money in the reserve account.
Yeah,
But in this situation, certainly, you know, what people are entitled to, they're entitled to. So
Yeah.
my question is, should the department heads make sure that they budget some money for buyback in anticipation of any of their employees, you know, retiring? I mean,
Yeah, I think they should, because they say, well, we didn't know. Well, you may not know, but people talk, you have an idea.
Yeah.
And if you don't use it,
Yeah.
fine.
So, I have a question. When we created this reserve account, and it's just memory, but it seems to me like it was something in the neighborhood of $325,000 was
Yeah, that's a good,
what we,
Anticipated.
at the time we did it, I was under the impression that there was no more liability that was gonna be created. Is that correct or not?
well, there's additional,
There's no more
There shouldn't-
huge
there shouldn't
liability.
be-
But there's still some.
Yeah.
right, and new hires
Yeah.
would not have the kind of buyback language in their contracts that.
You wouldn't get
the
35 or
retirees
40
would have.
grand.
Okay. I thought it was for some reason, I thought it was a fixed number,
I did as well.
and once we got six
Stop.
plus years of $50,000, we would be done with that account, and we would never have to fund it.
At some point,
Oh.
that's true, because of the let's say $350,000, that was the total liability for 83 employees, all right? Current employees, and take all the fire, police, DPW, town hall. Of that $350,000, like 250 went to a dozen or so people.
Right, I remember that.
Because they were the ones that had been around, when they were hired,
Yeah.
they had the buyback language. So it's funding, getting that dozen or so, those would be the people who would typically would have to go to town meeting and vote to appropriate money
Yeah.
to square up with them, really. So, yeah.
I'm not clear on the buyback. Is it based on their sick time and annual time that they don't use?
Yeah.
What's the buyback? based
Yes.
Contract,
Yeah.
was negotiated, like those old contracts, they're nice. If you were on the receiving end of it, because any unused vacation day, unused sick days, you got buyback. And
Is
now
there-
they're saying, use
Well,
them.
if you use it or lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Is
some
there any
limit.
way they could use that as part of the early retirement? Like if they had 30 hours?
Well, on the old contracts, they could.
And then they just apply that 30 days and move it up. Okay, instead of this day I retire on this
Sort of
day.
like the old government contracts where you
Well,
could.
see, that's how I retire.
Yeah.
So if
It would be the
Yeah.
option of the employee, I think.
Yeah,
The employee, not the employer.
I think that's what Rick did too, he had something like 2 years.
yeah.
I think Linda's doing some of that
Yeah,
too. 'Cause
yeah.
she's got a lot of vacation time.
But I remember when Keith Hickey came on board, we said, no, you use your vacation or you lose it. Well,
Yeah.
they extended him a couple of times,
Yeah.
but they really shouldn't.
Yeah.
So if it's-
You know, or there should be a limit. I think like for most employees now, you know, you can buy back unused sick days, but there's a limit to it. Like maybe accumulate to 20, 25 days or something like
Yeah.
that. I don't know what the number is, but, whereas in some of the earlier contracts, you know, the limit might have been 150 days.
Right.
Which adds up to a lot of money. So if you got a $20,000, $25,000 payout for
Right.
somebody when they're retiring, that was always the problem. You couldn't dig that out of out of your budget, and so periodically we would have to go to town meeting
Yeah,
to appropriate the money. So the idea of this reserve fund was, instead of having to go to town meeting, it'd have some funds to use. But if somebody's gonna retire and they have a $4,000 buyback, should that come out of the reserve account, or should people build that
I think they
into-
should build that into their regular budget. And I
Yeah.
think that the reserve account should be for those extraordinary contracts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think so.
So one thing we might advise them is to come up with a number, say, first 10,000.
The first 10 grand.
Up to
I mean,
10,000
yeah.
should
And if we
be,
need to cover
the
you
budget,
for a
come out of
couple,
the
okay,
budget.
but, yeah, the first 10 grand should be in their budgets.
yeah.
So if there's still some language in the contract that says they can buy back 20 or 25 days or whatever, it is, at least the value of that should be in their own budget.
Yeah. But they'll say, well, we don't know what to budget because we don't know who's retiring. And I'm saying, take an average and budget.
Right.
I mean, I noticed, well, it's a line item in the police department budget, but I didn't see it in
In any other,
any of the other budget.
yeah.
Should be in the fire too. And
It should be, I mean, I think a part of it is that the fire department, budget is not rich in that area in terms of the buybacks. So somewhere along the line, they negotiated something, and the give and take, they were able to,
There's at least one large obligation in that department though,
oh, yeah,
Yeah,
right?
oh, yeah,
Of 30 or more, I think.
yep, it's a big chunk of money. And that was the kind of payout that, certainly was the intention to cover, if not all of it, maybe a good portion of it. But I think in the past, and it's certainly expect in the future that departments would figure out how to cover the buyback, unless it's an extraordinary amount of money. So I think that, it's funny, that there's policy language and then implementation language. And that's the piece that's missing, that we haven't really attended to. So it might be, it's some conversation to have with the town manager. And, he came to me and asked me, because there are the three people from the police department who, all three have pretty rich buybacks. And there's no way that, even though they budgeted for $14,000, there's no way that, it's already over by $12,000, so.
no.
They've covered some of it, and we're looking to cover the rest of it.
So the language should be that departments should be responsible for their own normal buyback
I think
policy?
buybacks
And then we
are
have to
less than a
define
certain amount of money, whatever it should be. I think that it would need some research again, and look
Yeah.
and say, what's the average?
average?
Maybe it's 7,500 or something like
Yeah,
that.
whatever the
But
average is.
whatever is typical, when a 15, 20-year veteran retires.
Yeah.
You ought to have that in the budget, your standing item every year.
Just for reference, is our buyback policy per department, or is it standardized
Oh,
across the
no, it's all
department?
different.
That's what
I
I'm
mean,
saying.
it's getting more standardized, but that's where these extraordinary buybacks came from, was years ago when you came in and negotiated a one-on-one and there was no consideration that you're getting something different than somebody else. And, oh, we really need you, so we're gonna give you whatever you want, or I think some of that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and
It's
it was
$6.50.
have a benefit because salaries were,
Yeah,
were not what they are today.
it's $6.53. I know we have to be downstairs
Right.
at 7.
Yeah.
Can we take out of order number 6? And do that before we recess?
Yeah, actually, that's the next thing on our agenda, is to, after this discussion.
I have this one, right here.
Oh, well, I was planning on, okay, let's
that?
bring it up, let's do it now. Let's
I
have the
thought we could
discussion
do
now,
it.
Yeah.
I was going to make a motion to recommend the revised Article 5 as presented on February 13th at 5:30 PM.
Second.
Second.
All right, seconded by Chuck. All right, we've got a motion to recommend Article 5. And this is clear, the changes here, to see if the town will vote to accept the Community Preservation Act and establish a property tax surcharge of 3%, be effective July 1st.
Yeah, the 3%, the effective date, and the 3 statutory
Internal
exemptions.
purposes, right, and we've got property owned and occupied as a domicile by a person who would qualify for low-income housing or low, moderate-income senior housing, and the town would be exempt from the surcharge upon filing an annual application. First $100,000 of taxable value of residential real estate would be exempt, automatically applied. First $100,000 of taxable value of Class 3 commercial and Class 4 industrial would be exempt, automatically applied. So
The only reason I'm saying it's revised is because the selectmen haven't voted to accept this article yet. So, we don't anticipate any issues, but we've been surprised before, because without that specific language, I would not recommend the other one, because it was too generic.
Way more transparent.
Yeah.
I think people need to see those numbers if they're
Yeah.
going to really rationalize that.
Yeah,
yeah.
and then they can vote based, like, it's good for the town, but it might not be good for them personally, and they can vote on what their personal finances
Right.
are.
All right, we got a motion and a second, had some discussion, anything else? Any other discussion? So the motion is to recommend Article 5 as written. Vote, James?
Aye.
Well,
Yep, aye.
Aye.
chair votes aye.
Now, do I make a motion to recess to join the selectmen on the second floor?
Motion made, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Because it take me forever to get.
I lived on